Hi, everyone. I'm Paula Harvey from Tahone Ranch Conservancy. We're going to continue with another easy drawing lesson that's going to help improve your observation skills while doing nature journaling. Let's get started. So today, we're going to talk about value. And in particular, we're going to talk about shadows. Now, shadows give your subject some form and some dimension. It's very important in order to keep your subject from looking flat. Learning to see and draw those core shadows, the reflected light, the center light, the highlight, and the cast shadow, all five of those are part of learning about shadow. Let's talk briefly about what is value. Value describes the light to dark range that you see on objects around us and in our drawings. It's all based on what lighting there is and how the lighting changes on your subject. So observing and recording those values that are on the subject you're studying will improve not only your drawing, but much more importantly, it improves your observation skills. This exercise that we're about to do is going to ramp up your observation skills enormously. Now, seeing values not easy, especially because there's so many distractions around you. There's sound and there's all kinds of other things going on around your subject. And there's color. Color makes it very confusing sometimes. So one way to help you train your eyes to see value is to squint. That will blur your subject. And so rather than seeing color, and you will see a gross shape, but not the specific shape, what you're going to start seeing is differences in the light to dark value. When you're drawing value in journaling, rather than drawing this unlimited, infinite space of values, stick to 3 or 4 different values only, from the very lightest to the very darkest. In drawing shadows, however, there's 5 different steps. Here's the steps to drawing shadows. The first shadow that you're going to draw on whatever object you're drawing is called the core shadow. That's the opposite side of the light source. The second part of shadows that you're going to draw is the reflected light. So your object might be sitting on the ground, for example. Light is coming in and hitting the ground, and it's reflecting off the ground to your object. That's a midtone. It's not going to be particularly dark. It's kind of glowing off of your object. The third part of shadow is the center light. This is between the brightest part of your shadow, which is in fact not shadow, it's where the light is actually hitting directly on that spot, and that core shadow. It's that place right in between. It's a mid-value tone, and it lightens as it gets closer to that bright highlighted center. My favorite part of drawing shadow is step 4, the crisp, bright highlight in the center. Now, keep this in mind, and I'm going to repeat it later. Shiny objects have very bright highlights. So bright, in fact, if you were standing and looking at, for example, a clean, bright car, the sun hitting that would reflect off of it and into your eyes. That's that highlight we're talking about. In an object that's dull, it's not going to be so crisp, but it will still be the lightest part of your object. And then the final part that you'll draw is called the cast shadow. That's the shadow the object you're studying actually creates itself. And this is the darkest of all 5 steps. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to do the following exercise. It's a 5-step exercise. And after you've completed that exercise, you're going to start really changing the way you see the subjects that you draw. Shadows, they give your subject a 3-dimensional form, and it changes everything. Now, there's a special tip. Again, I'll repeat this at the very end. When you're drawing your subject, put in the shadows before you put in the color. You're going to actually layer the color on top of the shadow color. This is the guide that we're going to use in learning how to draw shadows. It comes from John Muir Laws, and you can use this in your steps. Very well drawn out, easy to see, and easy to follow. So let's take a look for a minute. The first step we talked about was drawing that core shadow, and here it is right here, this dark spot here, this line right over here, and under here. Notice, by the way, it is not a sharp line, but he kind of does a sort of a scribble across that. And that kind of gives you a sense that it's a rounded shape as opposed to flat. The second step is that highlight. So the sun comes in this way, hits the ground, and the ground then reflects some of that light back onto your subject. So look right under here. This is a mid value. It's lighter than that core shadow, and it's right here as well. And then just slightly under here. All right, that's that mid-tone. Your third step is going to be the center light. That's the stuff right above. Here's the core shadow here. Here's the core shadow here. Right above it. That's the center light. It's also a mid-value tone. So you're going to use that as well. And notice that as it gets closer to this light source, that mid-value tone gets lighter and lighter. Same up here, it gets lighter, but it goes all the way up. And then here, it starts. Right here's the core shadow. It starts here and it keeps going all the way up. The next step, the one I said is my favorite step, you're going to actually take an eraser to do this step. That's the highlight. And look at it goes right along here as a straight line. And then right along here. And then a spot right here. Notice it's not here because this is a flat surface directly facing the sun. And so nothing is drawn on here at all. Final step, step 5, that's the shadow that these objects are actually casting themselves. So rather than the dark spot at the back of the moon, for example, it's the dark spot on the back of this object, you're looking at the shadows that this object casts. It's right here. Notice that this object is round and so is its shadow. This object is pretty straight and geometrical, and while it's a round shape, the sun hits it like it is a sharp geometric shape, and so the shadow it casts is sharp. Also notice that underneath the cast shadow, it's the darkest spot. So under, it's quite dark right here and here. Now you are welcome to use this quick sketch that I put together for you if you'd like, and use this to fill in those 5 steps, or you can create your own page with these shapes or any shapes that you choose to do. Doesn't matter. The steps are always going to be the same. If you use these, the way you start to draw this, if you want to draw your own, is start with those geometric shapes on the ends. And then from there, extend your lines. Let's go back through what the steps are. Step 1, you're going to draw those geometric shapes, and then you're going to draw the dark core shadow on the side of the object that's farthest from its light source. So if the light source is coming from way up here, coming down here, farthest away is here, 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 and here. Notice that it's a dark tone. It's almost the darkest tone. It's the second to the darkest tone in all 5 steps. The darkest tone will be that cast shadow that you do at the very end, but this is quite dark. Also notice it is not a straight line, so you might want to just kind of scribble it on nice and firmly like this in a straight line, but it's got rough edges. That'll give you a sense of roundness. Next is step 2. This is that reflected light. This is the light that when the light comes in from this direction and hits the surface, it then reflects back on your subject. So it's underneath this part. So notice it's a lighter value than the cast shadow here, 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 and here. The very, very smallest amount here you might want to do. When you're doing your third step, This is also going to be the mid-tone value. And this one is going to be next to and above that original cast shadow. So here's the original shadow. Then right above it, you're going to shade in, and then keep shading all the way in, all the way across. But notice at the very top, it's going to be the lightest spot. This is the spot where the light is actually hitting it. But everything is colored, including the ends, in a mid-tone here as well. But it's graded, so it's darker here than it is here. And then mid-tone here, right above, this is that cast shadow right here, right above it, it's darker, and then a little lighter here, and then lighter here, but it continues to be on the entire top surface of that shape. Just to keep in mind when you're doing nature journaling outdoors, that there's a couple of things to keep in mind. And one is that the tone moves as you move. So those things that you're looking at often has to do with where you are in relation to the light. Step 4, my favorite part, is doing the highlight. This is where the light is hitting directly. So look here, nothing drawn on here because the highlight is on that complete surface. But take a look, this is erased. Along here, that was that mid-tone that is now erased in a line and erased here. And then this one spot right at this part of this circle. Those are erased so that it gives it a sense of it's the brightest spot. Keep in mind again, the highlight moves as the observer moves. If the light source is behind you, the center, the center light's going to be closest to the middle of your object. And if that light source is in front of you, it moves towards that core shadow. So this light source, if it is in front of you, is going to be closer to this core shadow. If the light source is behind you, it's going to be closer to the middle. And then the last step is the shadows that the objects themselves actually cast. So keep in mind, these are the darkest shadows, the darkest application of your pencil. And they are actually going to be darker than the core shadow. Here's the core shadow again. This is darker. Here's the core shadow. This is darker. Core shadow here, darker there. All right. And then also notice too, this actually has a grade as well. So the closer it is underneath, tucked underneath, the object's going to be much darker than the parts that are further out. And if your object's round, the shadow is going to be rounded. If the object is more angular, then your object, your shadow is also going to be more angular. Here again is that worksheet that you can use. And after you have created this and practiced this, try creating additional shapes and apply those shadows. Finally, let's talk about one more thing about applying shadow. So in this particular case, this nature journaler was drawing poppies in the spring. What this person started doing was the gross shape, kind of rounded. You can barely see those lines, but kind of a round shape. And then they put in the detail of each of the petals like this. And then using a light purple colored pencil, they drew in the shadows and they drew it in grades. So it's darker here and lighter here. And notice there's some lines here. Those are done by erasers. So those were the highlights. There's some other shadow right here, darker over here. And then after applying all those shadows to their satisfaction, then they went ahead and used orange and colored it in lightly, but layered until they got the effect they wanted. So notice it's a little darker right here, a little oranger. That's not a different color so much as a firmer application. So you're going to, again, draw the color at the very end of your observational drawing. And that's it for creating shadows, which will create those dimensions in your drawing and absolutely transform the way you observe your subjects. Thanks again for joining me, and we'll see you next time.